New to Formula One?
Or just as obsessed as we are?
Welcome back to another episode of Formation Lab,
where we teach you all the dirty details that you need to know to be the best Formula One fan that you can be.
You are live with the Hornsby sisters. I'm Katie.
And I'm Megan.
Hello. I am so excited because today we're talking about Formula One and the U.S. market, because this weekend is the U.S. Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, and we are thrilled that we've got a race in our time zone so we can sleep in a little bit. We're going to hop right in and talk all about Formula One and the U.S. Traditionally, it has always been a European-based sport, with the first World Championship taking place at Silverstone in the U.K. It was won by the Italian racer Giuseppe Farina in a supercharged Alfa Romeo. So it is very much so tied to being a premier European sport. And the one area that Formula One has yet to immerse itself and develop this deep, diverse fan base that you can see in Europe is here in the United States. Part of the reason why I even started this was because I wanted to be able to talk more about Formula One with all my friends and build a community for racing fans, for Formula One fans to come together and talk about how cool Formula One is, because I've said it before, we have people here that are missing out on this amazing thing that'll take up your weekends and you'll fall in love with it. All right, everybody, buckle up, because here we go. As of right now, Formula One has raced in 10 different cities across the U.S., which was a huge shock when Megan and I were doing our research, because we could really only come up with a couple names. All 10 have had various degrees of racing and various degrees of success as Formula One tracks. We're going to start with Watkins Glen, which is in upstate New York. And Watkins Glen hosted 20 races from about 1961 to 1980. It was this fast track around this wooded hilltop that quickly became a favorite for drivers. It became a favorite for viewers as well because it was an attraction that people visited every year, unlike the tracks in Sebring, Florida and Riverside, Southern California, who only hosted one race. Our next track destination is known by many in the world of U.S. motorsport, and that's Indianapolis. And a total of 19 races took place here during 1950 to 1960, and then they returned from 2000 to 2007. In the 1950s, the race was technically on the F1 calendar under the name Indy 500, but the Indy race ran with different regulations, meaning that if the teams wanted to participate, they'd have to change the design and the build of the car in order to participate. As a result of that, the only European driver to compete in the event, while it was still considered an official round of F1, was the great Alberto Ascari of Ferrari. We're not quite sure why it stayed an event on the calendar so long. It might have been one of the tactics to try to incorporate the U.S. fan base into Formula One. Up next is Long Beach, California, which saw a total of 8 races from 1976 to 1983. And Long Beach was conceived as the Monaco of the American coast. In 1983, John Watson won from 23rd on the grid, and this charge to the field remains the lowest starting position from which any driver has won a Formula One race. The American car capital of Detroit saw Formula One from 1982 to 1988. The track wound around America's car capital but was bland and bumpy. The first year in Detroit, 1982, the United States saw 3 races in the States: Detroit, Long Beach, and Las Vegas, making the U.S. the first country to ever host 3 rounds of a Formula One World Championship in one season, which we may see again, so we'll come back to that. Phoenix, Arizona hosted 3 Grand Prix from 1989 to 1991, and they faced a similar issue to Detroit where the track was just bland, and there were a large number of 90-degree turns that all in all reduced speed. And Phoenix also had similar issues to the Dallas track, which hosted 1 race in the July of 1984, and it was hotter than hell. There were parts of the track surface that started to break, and the morning warm-ups were canceled. This circuit was incredibly bumpy and quick, and Alan Prost hilariously said the only good thing about it is that suddenly Detroit is not so bad. Lastly, Las Vegas, specifically Caesars, hosted 2 races in 1981 and 1982. So the U.S. has been home to many races throughout the country. Currently, it resides in Austin at the Circuit of the Americas, and next year we will see a race in Miami. And I think the biggest question is the fact that could the U.S. get 3 races in 2023 with a return of Las Vegas? A couple execs that deal with the planning of the Las Vegas Grand Prix are actually checking out the race in Austin. So, it might just be part of the rumor mill, but we might get to see 3 races back in the United States in 2023. It's kind of insane that the U.S. has hosted so many races, yet we fail to have a strong American following. And I think the main reason is that it's logistically hard. Because it's primarily a European-based sport, the live events happen around the European timeline, meaning that we have some early morning races. For example, Turkey, Russia, and Azerbaijan were all 8 a.m. for those of you on the East Coast and 5 a.m. for those of you on the West Coast. Luckily, most races are held between 9 and 10 a.m. Eastern time, which isn't too bad, but that's 6 and 7 a.m. for the West Coast. So it's easier for people who want to get into motorsport to choose series that have midday live events like NASCAR or IndyCar, especially as a new fan. And NASCAR and IndyCar started in the 1940s before Formula One. And the benefit of following a domestic series is that it's always been actively reported on for the local and national news. And a midday event, you can head to the bar with some of your friends, you can get some drinks, and you can watch NASCAR. You're making brunch if you're watching Formula One, which it can be a boozy brunch, but you're hosting that at home at, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9. The other big thing that goes into being a Formula One fan is wanting to go visit a race and wanting to go see a race. And I think the main issue for especially younger fans is the cost. Going to a race weekend can be upwards of $1,000 between tickets, flight, somewhere to stay, food, and again, you can't forget about your merch. Another big factor is that there are very few American drivers. The last American to win a race was Mario Andretti at the Dutch Grand Prix in 1978. It's over 50 years ago, 40 years ago. 50, whatever, you guys know. There have been more recent Americans like Alexander Rossi in 2015 and Scott Speed in 2007, but their F1 careers were short without much to report. There have been some rumors that the Andretti family is getting back into Formula One and may take a place as a constructor alongside Alfa Romeo. And I think all Americans would love to see another American-based constructor get in there and fight for a world championship alongside Haas. That would give us 2 teams to root from, and, we may find an American driver one day in the future in Formula One. It's nothing if not with drama. So in 2005, there was a disaster at the Indianapolis Grand Prix. In front of more than 200,000 fans, 14 of the 20 cars pulled into the pits after the formation lap to boycott their tire manufacturer, Michelin. And this was all due to safety concerns. David Coulthard, who drove his Red Bull into the pits, apologized to the fans, saying, "It is remarkable we could not find a solution to go racing. We have the crowd here, and to come here and not race, this is going to leave a long-lasting bitter taste in people's mouths." And Coulthard was right. It left a noticeable mark on American F1 fans, and it was arguably one of the worst PR nightmares of the sport. And for that to happen in 2005, it's nice for us new fans who don't remember that incident, but for our parents or for other people that were into the sport or trying to get into the sport then, to fly everyone to America and to not give us a race when it was something as simple as a safety concern that could have been fixed definitely caused some issues for Formula One. So you might be wondering where we are now as Americans in the world of Formula One. Formula One has U.S. ownership. ESPN has a partnership with Sky Sports, and we have an American-owned team, Haas F1. In 2017, Liberty Media, a U.S. company, acquired Formula One for $8 billion. Former CEO Chase Carey stated that they want to put an organization in place that lets us make these events everything they can be, reaches out across digital media that we're not connecting to today, and build a marketing organization that connects fans and enables fans to connect to the sport. The current CEO, Stefano Domenicali, has said that Miami is the perfect destination for a Formula One race. It's a multicultural city with high energy. And I completely agree. I think Miami could put Formula One on the map even more so than Austin can. I think in the US, sometimes we have that stigma around Texas. And now that we're in Florida, which also might have a stigma around it, we are expanding the sport. We hope that we're going to get that race back in Las Vegas. I would also love to see a race somewhere either more central or more north, maybe somewhere in New England, that would allow even more fans to physically access the sport and make it to a race. Because traveling a couple towns over in Italy is not the same as traveling a couple states over in the US. The US is an untapped market with unlimited financial potential. In 2016, US consumers spent $56 billion to attend sporting events. And I think one question that we often ask with Formula One and the US is, did Drive to Survive by Netflix help? And it sure didn't hurt. John Suchins, ESPN's Victor of Programming and Acquisition, says, there's no way to quantify it, but I think we would all agree that it certainly has helped. It's brought in a more casual fan that probably was not even an F1 fan. I see people posting on social media, athletes and others, saying, I was not a Formula One fan, but now I'm engaged and can't wait to watch the next either episode or season of the Netflix series or watch our races, which is incredible. Netflix came in at the right time. They entered this time where I think miniseries and docuseries are very engaging to a lot of people, and they chose Formula One. And for a while, we didn't know if we were going to get a third season or a fourth season. And every year, it's normally one of the drivers that's like, oh, Netflix is with us, which confirms that we're getting another season. And a lot of the times, that's how I introduce it to people. I say, hey, go on Netflix, watch Drive to Survive. It's such an intimate level of access to the sport that can't be offered or that isn't offered anywhere else. F1 itself has also made changes. They've prioritized the US market, and they have definitely done a better job marketing around the new Miami Grand Prix. They participate in events around the US with Red Bull in New York last week, or previously Daniel Ricciardo driving in Vegas. ESPN has been a huge help in providing another place for fans to watch Formula One. They have a partnership with Sky Sports to broadcast, which allows for that continuity. And they've expanded it to a 90-minute lead up before the race, giving us pre-race interviews and the pre-race show. And they've also expanded coverage on their website and app. Another way to watch the sport, which is how we watch the sport, is through F1 TV. They've got their own streaming service. It's about $80 for the year, and they do a great job. You can check in on different drivers throughout the race, see their driver cams. It's phenomenal. At the end of the day, like this year, the true title fight has attracted more and more people. There is more competition within the sport, which is leading to more interest. And thanks to the budget caps and some of the other regulations, we could see this competitiveness continue, leading to more and more fans. Formula One has made massive steps toward moving in the larger untapped American market, but there are still some barriers. We already have an established NASCAR and IndyCar circuit, but NASCAR has been struggling. And I want to be clear that the goal is not to replace NASCAR, but to complement them with personality and rivalry. With Formula One, you've got 20 drivers and you've got this intense rivalry where you get to know them and you get to know who they're fighting for and why they're fighting. Domenicali stated that the drivers and Formula One itself creates the rivalries and drama, and then it's our duty to show off their personalities to the U.S. audience. They are the stars with incredible personalities of different cultures, and that is so true. You've got drivers from countries all over the world competing, and you get to know them. You get to know where they're from. You get to know their personalities. You understand why they're racing, what drives them to be the best, and it's absolutely incredible. The goal is to engage millennials and younger generations, and I think Drive to Survive has done that by letting us really see who these drivers are and who these teams are. COVID-19 led to some increased downtime for the brand, and it used that time to really develop good quality content and marketing for F1. So we hope to see continued improvements. I think the teams have done a really good job putting out different bits and different segments with the drivers that allows us to get to know them even more. And to kind of go back to something I mentioned earlier that is really something that I think keeps Americans out of Formula One and not engaged is that there is that lack of solid American talent. We've got the Haas team that's sponsored, but they've given us questionable performance, and we've got no American drivers. There's not one driver that races under the U.S. flag. There's a potential with IndyCar driver Colton Herta, who's already won on the Austin F1 circuit. He's trained in Europe, and he performed well in Formula 3, but there's not someone out there that us Americans can be supporting every single week for country. Think about the Olympics in total. There are sports that get played that we know nothing about, but we still support them, because you're putting an American on that team. And if I know anything about the U.S. is that we love sports and we love to support those from our own country that are competing. I am desperate. I am in need of more people to talk about Formula One with, and so much to the point that I started this podcast to try to get more people involved in the sport and understand how cool it would be if it was featured in the U.S. more, and how cool it would be if we had a full fan base here that really came out and supported not only the drivers but the constructors as well. And I've said it this whole entire episode, there is so much potential for Formula One here in the States. This Monday, just a couple of days ago, Daniel Ricciardo was featured on the pregame coverage of the Bills Monday Night Football game. He's also been featured in a couple Pardon My Take episodes with Barstool. And it's moments like that where ESPN, F1, maybe Barstool can boost engagement and awareness of the sport itself. And the F1 CEO, Stefano Domenicali, said it best. What F1 has is a plan of communication that is quite strong in the US. We need to hammer information with the right channels in a continuous way. And engagement needs to be throughout the F1 season. It can't just be before the Austin race, and it can't just be before the Miami race next year. We need to engage the market and you guys and get them involved, and we also have to explain the sport a little bit. Formula One in the US, it's got a history, it's got a future. I'm hoping the future takes off and we go racing quite often in the US, and that you guys are enjoying getting to know Formula One and continue to get to know it, because it's truly incredible.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us at Dirty Driving Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
Until next time, stay dirty.